live.
Good evening, everyone. Today is the 25th day of October. This is the full Village Council meeting. Would you please stand as you're able to get the meeting started with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Is everyone, Mr. Lanzer, will you do roll call?
Yes. Mr. Batcher? Here. Mr. Cheney?
Here.
Mr. Knipp? Here. Mr. Brittenhoff? Ms. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Van Hart? Here. All members present.
Very good. I'll mention at the top that our village administrator, Mr. Hirth, isn't feeling well this evening, so Mr. Lanzer will be taking over those duties for the meeting this evening. Presuming everyone has had an opportunity to look at the agenda, is there a motion to accept or amend and accept the agenda for this evening?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. I see there's no one registered to speak to council this evening. Is that accurate to everyone's knowledge? And the minutes to be approved, presuming everyone's had an opportunity to take a look at them. These are the minutes for October 11th. Is there a motion to accept or amend and accept?
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. I am unaware of a report from Chief Timmers. Is there a report?
I don't believe so, and this is his last week as active chief of the fire district.
Well, we certainly wish him the best and thank him for his service to the fire district, to the Village of Gulf Manor. I have a couple announcements. Here are those there. Commissioner Driehaus is letting everyone know that the third round of the small business grants that closed earlier in the month, that they voted this past week to grant everyone who applied and gave all the information that was requested of them. Everyone will be getting some portion of the grant money that they have. So that's great news to anyone that applied for those business grants. Again, those weren't loans, those were grants, small business grants for folks. So that's great news for folks that will be in touch about that. I was able, Mr. Lanzer, to review this. I think I failed to get back with you to say specifically that, do you need me to sign the bottom of it? This is
It's the audit report.
the audit report that we covered this at our previous meeting, and I looked at it in between, and we'll be signing that and handing that off. You may recall neighbors opposing the pipeline extension. Nope. They officially dissolved this past week. So they sent out a letter concerning that, thanking everyone for the contributions and support of the organization. If you're interested in that letter, I have that here. We will be having a brief executive session at the end of this meeting for matters of personnel and
the purchase and sale of real estate, so two quick topics.
Right. And I believe the rest of my material will be within those meetings. So that is what I have. Final thing concerning elections. Mr. Lancer will be talking more about the elections being on November 2nd. I wanted to let everyone know I've been putting the message out there that in support of all the candidates, I have volunteered to deliver flyers for anyone. So if you're running and you want me to deliver flyers for you, let me know. Pick the longest street because I'm only going to do one street. All right, so whatever street it is that you have that's left over, I've already done this for some of the folks that are running, and I'm available to do it for whoever's running. So make that, spread that word, and
Can I schedule you for 2 years out?
Maybe see how things go.
I'll put you on my Christmas card list.
And I believe that is it for my report. Is there any questions concerning that? All right, so then the next item we have here is the administration report.
All right, as Mayor Densmore mentioned, I'll be filling this role in place of the administrator, Mr. Hirth. who's not feeling well this evening. The first item he has is COVID protocols. The municipal building continues with mask requirements and is working with clients at the doors. As far as administration project updates, the Vera Road update, the projected project completion is still projected for mid-November, pending issues or weather, like rain last couple of days. I'm sure is impacting that, but let's keep our fingers crossed. Waste collection contract. The transition to the new Rumpke services has gone smoothly. Rumpke collected bagged yard waste from only 4 properties on Monday, October 18th. Mr. Hirth would like to see the village and our council members encourage greater use of this service. Leaf collection. Leaf collection season began today and will be performed focusing weekly on the schedule available on the website. So if you have a question about when your street is getting or is set to get their leaves removed, check the village website, it's on there. And he wants me to report more specifically about our preparations, which I'll do in my section. Playground project. No new information or timing for the project. And the anticipated construction will begin before the end of the year with the spring opening of the new structure. So let's hope we stay on track there. We conducted the first round of strategic planning where we identified issues that will move the village forward. We are looking to conduct a second session on November 15th or the 18th to review information gathered in the last session and focus on community engagement. Technology, Chief Campbell. Ron said that Chief Campbell will report this evening on progress made toward the body cam project.
Oh, good, he told me that. We're still working on it. The vendors are no longer on site. We've been working on having the body worn camera coordinate with the vehicle mounted camera. And we've been testing the data consumption, and things are moving in the right direction. We still anticipate a full deployment by the end of the year.
That's exciting.
Are those sensors that are installed on the outside of the building or whatever those gray things are part of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
How the system we had worked before, the video that was captured by the dash camera had to be manually downloaded, brought into the building, and transferred. These antennas allow data capture whenever the vehicles are running near the building. So it helps us greatly.
All right, moving on. Village temporary sign requirements. So we're in election season and everyone is putting out their election signs. Here's a reminder that temporary signs may not be placed in the right of way or on utility poles or on public property. If you have any additional questions about locations, please see the website. The sign regulations are there. And last, election day. So we're quickly approaching election day. The Hamilton County Board of Elections will host Golf Manor Precincts A and B in the community hall for voting on Tuesday, November 2nd from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. The south parking lot will be designated for handicap parking that day, and the pool entrance will be located at the back of the community hall under the white tent, allowing space for campaigners in the front of the employee lot. So I think historically campaigning was restricted to across the lot, in the lot next to the park. Because we're moving the door, campaigning can come on the side of Weehee Road. COVID-19 protocols will be observed as designated by the Board of Elections in Hamilton County. And that is the end of the administrator's report.
Any questions?
How long is the yard waste? Is it just October that they're doing that?
I think through December.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, yard waste or leaf?
Yard waste from Rumpke
yard waste, yeah, through December, I believe.
through December. Okay.
Yeah, through December.
Yeah.
It works, I guess we're live.
We're live,
We are.
but I can double check on that date and get back with you.
I wasn't sure if it was on the website, so that's fine.
It is on the website.
It is? Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Lancer, do you know of any specification or maybe our legal counsel knows of how close to the doors campaigners are allowed to be?
It's
usually 50 feet,
Yeah.
75 feet, so that's why if the entrance was here on the side of the building, it forced people across the street. By moving it to the back, it allows campaigners to be out on the sidewalk area,
Okay.
which is a lot easier than trying to chase people down as they're coming across the street.
I think it's much safer.
Uh-huh.
But, usually there's like the precinct executive will be given flags to put out to say, this is where you must stand.
Yeah, my understanding is the precinct executive is responsible for
Right.
managing that.
Right, so any complaints go to the precinct executive.
They have someone on the grounds that is verifying that rules are being followed, or is that just
Yeah.
kind of random?
They are supposed to.
Okay.
Yeah, traditionally what would happen is if there was a complaint, the complainant would go in and talk to the people from the Board of Elections. Board of Elections would then come out and talk to the person and ask them please to respect that distance. Rarely are we involved as the police to enforce that unless it works into a fist fight or throwing campaign literature at each other. Hopefully none of that will happen.
Right. Well, with the flags, I'm presuming it'll be very clear where people are allowed to be and where they're not allowed to be.
Yeah, it'll be clearly marked.
It's how it was in November as well,
Yeah.
of last year.
With the closer, like on this side of the street?
Mhm.
Yeah. Right. All right, any other questions? Mr. Lancer, will you do the fiscal officer report?
Yeah. For the month of September, fiscal year 21, the village had an adjusted bank balance of $3.7 million. Of this amount, $3.6 million can be found in the village's primary checking account, while the remaining balance rests in the village's several law enforcement funds. I always like to note that despite the figure that I mentioned found in the village's primary checking account, it's important to note that the vast majority of this amount is actually accounted for in several road and street funds, also known as dedicated funds, and this can only be used for those purposes. For the month, the village had 72 cleared payments that totaled $423,000. The most significant payees for the month were payroll, Adlita, Rumpke, Jefferson Health Plan, and the Ohio Police and Fire pension. Meanwhile, the village received 34 payments that totaled $176,000. As for the general fund, the village received $78,000 in income tax receipts for the month. This amount was slightly less than what the village received in September of last year by approximately $6,000. Despite this, total village income tax receipts for the year exceed those from the same point last year by approximately $50,000. So the village is on track to exceed the total figure from last year and exceed the forecast, which is good news for the village. In regards to property tax receipts, if you recall at the last council meeting, I mentioned that the village had received the second half disbursement of property taxes in August of this year. Last year, the village didn't receive that second half disbursement until September. So when you look at it through the financial packet and go to the month of September, you'll see a little bit of a discrepancy there. The good news is the difference between total receipts is just north of $29,000 to the good. So we've generated approximately $29,000 more than what we received in property tax receipts last year. Again, that's a great trend. It means that property values are going up. Total revenues for the year are $1.8 million. This figure is $125,000 more than what the village received through the same point last year. And again, the village is on track to meet or exceed total forecasted revenues. As for appropriations, the village spent $195,000 in general fund appropriations in September of this year. This amount was $49,000 more than what the village spent during September of last year. And I think the biggest reason for this is due to payroll scheduling. In September of this year, September had 3 payrolls processed, whereas in September of last year, the village only processed 2 payrolls. The difference in payrolls between this year and last year was $39,000. So with that in mind, total spend for the year as a percentage of appropriations is higher than what it was through September of last year by nearly 6%. Again, village administration is monitoring this closely and will make any necessary adjustments. The other item, that's the end of my financial report. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question about the statement on total spending.
Yeah.
And it's relative to last year this time. With all the COVID money, is that a separate consideration, or are we saying that with the COVID money, it's actually?
We're only talking
making up
about
for-
general fund spend right there. All the COVID money was accounted for in two separate funds outside the general fund.
Good, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Katie, how was that 50,000 for the place set?
Yeah.
Accounted for, is that accounted for yet, or how's that? work?
Yeah, so the village, let me back up. We are replacing the playset. The village was awarded $50,000 in a reimbursable grant from the county. To pay for on the front end, we spent $50,000 from the general fund. It's also part of the explanation why we're 6% higher than we were.
Okay, that's what I thought. I wondered, yeah.
With that said, we have not received reimbursement from the county yet. And Ms. Bergen said the reason why is the playset company hasn't cashed the check yet. So she's going to call them this week and see what the status of that is, and hopefully get that ball rolling so we can get reimbursement.
And if they cash it, then hopefully we'll get the reimbursement before the end of the year.
Yes, it needs to happen for our accounting by the end of the year, or else my job becomes more difficult. And I don't like difficult jobs. The other item I discussed in the finance meeting was the establishment of a reinvestment fund, or revitalization fund, as some communities call it. And how I explained it earlier was, when you think about the annual budget, there's two components to it. There's an operating component and a capital component. This would be a third component where monies would be, or revenues or resources would be set aside into a revitalization fund, and those could only be used for economic development purposes. We know economic development is a topic of great interest among this body. This is a tool to help make those, as I call it, dreams a reality. There's many different ways we can fund it. Some communities who've instituted it have seeded it with general fund. Some communities, when they project a carryover, will put a portion of that carryover into the revitalization fund. Some communities use it as a revolving loan mechanism where if they control property and they sell it, the proceeds from that sale go into the revitalization fund, so on and so forth. But the reason why I brought it up is I wanted to hopefully build support for it, and hopefully get support to doing a deeper dive into the possibility of instituting something like that here.
And for context, this is in alignment with our strategic planning process.
Yes, the strategic planning process and in alignment with the TAP study as well from a few years ago. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have about that as well.
What else do you need to proceed with that?
Well, ultimately, if we decide to go forward with it, we will need legislation authorizing it, and then we would need the county to approve it. And then we need to make a determination of, we can establish it and not fund it right away, but if we choose to fund it, it's ultimately your all's decision how we fund it and to what degree we fund it.
So at what point do we just say, yes, proceed with that process?
Well, I think in the finance meeting, Mr. Batcher requested a little bit more information.
Yeah.
So I will have more information about best practices, reaching out to some other communities who've instituted something like this. Silverton comes to mind, Lockland is another one, to get an idea of what percentage of general fund or carryover they fund annually, just so we have best practice information to make that decision.
I mean, having the account, it sounds like everybody has probably already discussed this at some levels.
Yeah.
Just want to proceed
Cool.
quickly as possible.
Is it fair to go ahead and, say, let's establish the fund, let the details follow, or do we?
I'm happy to do that.
From a finance perspective, I think we want to have some guidelines set and to look at what other communities are doing to make this successful versus just putting something together blindly and then having to amend it. We all love the idea of it, but I think we want to make sure that we understand how to craft it correctly and successfully first. I don't think it'll be a long drawn out process for us to do that, but I just want everybody to be on the same page and not come into it blindly. So I've asked Mr. Lanzer to come back in November to the finance committee with, here's what other communities are doing, here's how we can fund it, here's things it can be used for, and then we're going to craft legislation from that.
Perfect. I like it.
Awesome. Sounds good to me. The other item Mr. Hirth wanted me to talk about was leaf collection. So as Mr. Hirth wrote down, we have started leaf collection today, officially, but you may have seen the service guys in the leaf box in the village last week. What we wanted to do was focus last week before the official start date in clearing the curbs and the sewer grates, get those in good working condition before the heavy leaf falls and becomes all sorts of problems for our guys and safety and transportation in the village. So that's where we are. They knocked out, they reported that they traveled the entire village today, beyond the few streets that they were required to. As you can see, leaves are still green. There's not that much fall yet. So they're able to hopefully stay on top of it throughout the end of the year. But yeah, if you leaves fall, get them out to the curb, try to be on the, or get them out next to the curb, not in the curb. And let's try to be on schedule this year. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Lanzer. If no other questions, I'll ask Chief Campbell for his report.
I think before we do that, we'll need a motion to accept.
Yes.
A motion to accept the financial packet for September.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Chief Campbell.
Thank you. I prepared an activity report. The mayor and Mr. Hurt have a copy for the month of September. Police department responded to 328 calls for service. Those 328 calls resulted in only 8 criminal offense reports. So like I said last meeting, I like when that number is low. I like the calls for service number to be high. So that's looking good. If there's any questions on that, I know Mr. Hurt had a couple of questions. If you have questions on this, what the types of calls are, what they mean, just feel free to reach out to me. Also want to report that we have a background process going on a potential candidate for part-time police officer. I want to thank Mr. Betcher and Ms. Cheney for helping. We tried something new. We used the committee to talk to them, and keep you posted on how that goes as we work him in here. If there's no questions, that's all I have.
All right, great, thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Thank you. We have one piece of legislation on the agenda this evening. It's the second reading of ordinance 2021-11. So this is an ordinance, we do not have to make a motion read by title only. It automatically goes to title only for the second and third reading. So this is ordinance number 2021-11, an ordinance amending sections of ordinance 2019-10, an ordinance to combat discrimination and for the guarantee of equality and inclusion. We need a motion to put it back on the table for a second reading and approval, and then we can have some discussion. Motion in a second.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So it's on for the second reading. We'll have to do a roll call vote. Any questions or discussion? We've gone through this before, and I think after the last meeting, I reached out to Mr. Bidnoff. We had gone through some communications earlier in the summer. I sent a reminder that if there's any comments or concerns, to bring them forward. I don't know if there's.
So it was more something that I kind of wanted to bring up as a discussion point. I feel like it kind of, I wouldn't say behind the eight ball, obviously it was on the agenda for discussion for one time, which did not get discussed. And then last time we having COVID, obviously kind of stopped that from happening. And I felt that it's more prudent to have the discussion first, and then before the next reading, if we decide that we want to look at this a little bit further, however, I'll encourage you to look at it. I'll send you my thoughts on the matter, but that we can all kind of look at it and vote on that on the last reading. Because if we would make a change, my understanding is it does not delay the.
Correct. We're just making a motion to amend and approve it as amended.
Okay, so if I have notes, if I can, I'll read the notes and, you guys you can, I think that's the easiest way is if I read the notes, if that's okay. Okay. So as Terry mentioned, it was really, I feel like a very positive group effort. The mayor and Mr. Earth and Terry, I can't remember if there was anyone else there. So we all sat down, and myself sat down in the chambers, and we tried to come up with a way of moving forward that would satisfy some of the concerns that the religious institutions had, that were really unintended consequences of how they are understanding the current wording of the NDO. We appreciate all the work that which I think we were basically on the same page for watching from home in COVID quarantine. I saw, that was basically understood, and it was on the last point that there was a question. And that's the exemption language found in public accommodations section 4B. So the religious organizations had originally asked for language mirroring City of Cincinnati, saying explicitly that religious organizations are not a public accommodation. And that was really a major point of discussion. What is called a public accommodation, as we all remember, half of the council rejected that motion. So in the end, the ordinance included a more limited exemption in that section. Despite our discussions, so we were unable to find a language that satisfied the religious institutions, and they had therefore asked that the current exemption language be removed completely. They felt that the concept of that paragraph introduced more uncertainty and more problems. I understand that's not how it was spoken about in the previous meeting, that there was a mention of it being a second layer of protection. But I think it was in the ambiguity of that language that was where the concern came from, and they would just feel more comfortable removing that language. And maybe I'll ask Terry, if you don't mind, if potentially you could explain what were you trying to accomplish when you changed the public accommodations section?
Well, a couple of things. One, the City of Cincinnati ordinance, which has been held up religious institutions as the standard, says nothing here applies to religious institutions. So it takes religious institutions off the board for every component of our ordinance. And that was something going back 2 or 3 years ago, there was an objection to that broad brush exemption and trying to come up with something, as we said, Gulf Manor sized. The first change we made with lots of discussion was public accommodation as a definition, had in their private institutions, clubs and so forth, which by their very nature, they're not public, they're private. The other thing was we tried to build an exemption into the definition of public accommodation, which seemed to be contrary to the exemptions we were giving in other sections, and not wanting to, let's make exemptions, definitions. Mm-hmm. So in 4B, the way the exemption was crafted was specifically to take away that concern that if you dipped your toe in the water one time, you lost all protection. So if the synagogue decided for an occasion to rent the synagogue out to a public group, non-denominational group, that you forever lost your exemptions. And therefore, what I heard many times is now the rabbi will have to perform gay weddings. That's never going to be the case. So we tried to narrow it down to say it is not an act of discrimination when a religious institution takes action, except when it's for a commercial purpose, which we went through many versions back there in our debate over how to define commercial purpose, including getting language from Judge Hartman. So when it's commercial purpose or when village resources are used, and narrowing it down to it's only when that occasion occurs that the protection is not there. So it doesn't somehow lose that cloak of protection 365, 52.7. It's just for that particular event, for that particular purpose. So that's how we tried to narrow this down, was to make sure that we are not taking away religious institution protections. Also recognizing in the general language of the ordinance, we said we will follow whatever the constitutional law is. So the Supreme Court evolved this. We have to follow it. One thing specifically being acknowledging in Section 3B with employment that this does not undermine a ministerial exception, which has been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court in Our Lady of Guadalupe. So what we tried to do each time was bring this to the next generation, respecting that protection, but bring it to the next generation of where this council wanted to see it go, and what the voters of Gulf Manor overwhelmingly said yes. So that's why we tried to craft it that way.
In terms of communicating the concerns, I think that.
No, it's been a great dialogue.
Okay, I'm just
Great
saying,
dialogue.
at where we're at now, I think that the religious institutions would still prefer to have that removed, to get rid of any perceived ambiguity, at least on their end. And at least according to what you're saying, it sounds like the exemption would exist one way or the other.
Well, the difference between the two is, what I'm hearing is the religious institutions want, never are we a public accommodation. And what we've said is, you are never a public accommodation except when you specifically operate for a commercial purpose for that event. Or village resources. I don't know a circumstance where the village would say, here's $1,000 for this. But it is not, I mean, explicitly saying it is not an act of discrimination, I thought was taking it a very good positive step. And then saying you're only subject to this rule when you're operating at that time for a specific commercial purpose. That's how we recrafted it. And then of course we put the cap in on that.
Right, no, I mean, I don't think that was, meaning all of the other issues that we had spoken about, I think that was something that we can kind of put to bed. It was more on this section 4B, I believe we said. That they just felt, I mean, and I was communicating what they communicate to me. If I was of the legal mind that I could argue it and understand it and I think I understand it, but to fully express it in council, I would attempt to do so without boring everybody. But again, just my understanding is that they would prefer to be left out and be, rely on the exemption as it is written. They would feel more comfortable with the exemption as it's written without that section than with that section. Of course, understanding that they would rather have a broad brush, as you know from previous discussions, but just that's where they feel more comfortable. If there is not any significant objection to that.
Just for clarification,
Sure.
without 4B, but the rest of the stuff, the rest of the altercations are good. Yeah, so it's just the 4B piece. If there's no other question, I have a couple just examples of situations for clarification. So one with the idea of when Gulf Manor might ever give money to the synagogue for an event, all right? There's been times where the synagogue has, or members of the synagogue, I'm not really sure who, I think it was probably members of the synagogue, not the synagogue itself, had donated kosher hot dogs so that as a village, we could all be together and be eating kosher hot dogs, all right, so that everyone could participate together. In an instance, say, where Gulf Manor were to say, let us buy the hot dogs, here's $1,000 for that, all right? In that instance, it would be would it only be because we'd given money, or because, would it also be that in an instance like that where they're using, where we're gathering together in a public, park, that, if someone were to say, oh, wait a minute, we're not going to give a hot dog to you because I'm aware of your, how you identify yourself sexually, and I don't agree with that. You can't do that in Golf Manor, right? So is it because of the money, or is it because of?
The code, the example there would be, let's suppose we wanted to host a community event. And we said, we'd like to rent the synagogue for the community event. And we said, we negotiate now. I don't believe the synagogue rents itself out, but let's say it did. And they said, with $2,500, you can use this synagogue. And we said, here's $2,500, we want to host this community event, community forum.
This is Golf Manor.
Golf Manor.
The village of Golf Manor.
Saying our resources, we want to rent the hall.
Right.
And you said, fine, but Mr. Hirth is not invited. Or is
Which
his
I
husband?
have to interrupt you and say that would never happen. That would never happen. That would
The
never.
broader point, I see
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Right, because it's it's a discriminatory event.
100%.
And so that would be and we're talking about trying to come up with a lot of speculation as to where this would be.
Correct.
That's why I think that again, through the many, many months of debate, granting a broad exemption, say this shall not apply ever to religious institutions, was rejected by the council and the community because it's saying, no, that's a cheap way out. We're trying to craft this and balance it out. So that's why this was rewritten, that if village resources were used, you could not discriminate. Or if it's a commercial purpose for that event, discrimination would be prohibited.
But isn't it an exemption? Meaning, wouldn't those things automatically not, meaning, without that paragraph, wouldn't those things automatically be prohibited for discrimination before that?
What we said in here, the exemption is,
I mean, in 4B.
what we said is religious institutions acting that are exempt. In other words, there's no
It's an
discrimination.
exemption clause.
Right, there's no discrimination.
Right.
The only time you would be subjected to the ordinance would be if you're acting in a commercial capacity for that event.
Right.
Come one, come all, or village resources are being used. Those are the only two circumstances which would ever, and it's only for that event. It's not now for the next week, month, year, you've lost that protection. That's
Right, no, I understand what you're saying, but the whole paragraph is an exemption, so therefore without the exemption, wouldn't public accommodation and village funds going towards it automatically apply?
If I didn't create this exemption, you would have no protections.
And they would not have that, again, so I'm.
You would have no
communicating-
protections.
I'm communicating to you that the community at large, the leaders that I spoke to, feel more comfortable without that paragraph because they disagree with how it's written to the extent that they are okay with not having that exemption, that level of.
And I don't understand that logic because you're taking away a protection that we're given. Then we'd be relying
Again,
upon.
I think they're not understanding maybe the way that you wrote it, or maybe you're not understanding how they read it. But again, it doesn't take away from the NDO to get rid of the exemption. So therefore, if the people who you're writing the exemption for would rather not have that exemption, it seems to me that it's still accomplishing its purpose. I mean, it might.
And if we have to keep in mind that we're talking to one religious institution.
So
I mean, this applies if we have a Baptist congregation come in and they say,
To all of it,
we don't want
say
this.
all.
Right.
It applies to all. Correct. You know, and again, the religious institution that I've spoken to, I know at least 3 in the village, 4, and the consensus is that they feel more comfortable without this section of exemption.
and again, I don't understand taking away a protection to be more protected.
Again, but if it accomplishes the same goal and the council agrees with that, so then I think we're on the same page, then it's okay, right?
If the Jewish community says, hey, this is not something that we want, we appreciate the effort, We don't think the language in the future will legally do what, would be in our best interest, and they would like it removed. And the intention is to provide an extra level of protection for the religious community. But you guys aren't seeing it that way, then I have no problem taking it out. And we're just saying, hey, well, we know you didn't get the broad strokes, the voters said no, but we're gonna add a little stroke over here to help you. And you guys have looked at it and legally say, hey, in the long term, it's not gonna work for us, then I've got no problem taking it out. It's like saying, hey, I gave you an extra seatbelt. You don't wanna use it. Unless there's something I'm misunderstanding.
Right.
Can we read that section again? 'Cause I've
Okay.
been trying to find it here on the Gulf Manor website.
Yeah, I want to make a comment, but before we do, and I appreciate the input. I don't vote on this. My feeling on it, though, where I fall in my analysis of it, is that we're writing it this way because we feel like this is the best way to protect the ideal that was behind this whole thing. All right. And yes, I get that there are members of that represent the religious community that are saying, actually, if we look at a long-term legal strategy, might not be the best to have this in here right now. I don't know exactly what that means. Part of my spidey sense thinks, well, is it one of these deals where we can say down the road, well, that there was no religious exemption in here, and so therefore we want to, throw out the whole thing. All right. Even if that's not the case, to this point, which I'd like to hear feedback on, the idea that council is trying to create an ideal, and it's not just for the folks that are religious institutions in the community now, but any religious institution ad infinitum going forward into the future, that this protects them. All right. That we're not just crafting this for the Orthodox Jewish community. All right. It is indeed a point that, as far as I know, that's the only religious institutions that are here in the village of Gulf Manor. But historically, it hasn't been true. All right. And it may not be true moving forward either.
Let me read the exemption. Says, so if you go back to your 4th grade diagramming sentences, okay?
7th grade.
7th grade, we were advanced. Except when offering goods, services, accommodations, or entertainment for commercial purposes, or except when such offering is supported by village resources. So there's the narrow, except when you're doing this. It goes on, says, it shall not be an act of discrimination and or violation of this ordinance for any religious or denominational institution, organization, society, or association, or any nonprofit, charitable, or educational organization that is operated, supervised, or controlled by, or connection with a religious organization. So, except when you're not discriminating these organizations from limiting the offering of its goods, service, facilities, including places of worship, educational facilities, or their contiguous facilities and accommodations to persons of the same religion, or from giving preference to such persons. So, if you want to limit the use of your facilities to your members, co-religionists, it's not an act of discrimination. It is not an act of discrimination. If you are offering your facilities for a commercial purpose, then when you are offering your facilities for commercial purpose, you must obey the ordinance. Or if we give you money, you must obey the ordinance. Not forever.
If you accept money.
Accept money. Not forever, for that event. For that event. So it's specifically saying this is not an act of discrimination for you to limit your goods and services. It's not applicable in this ordinance. And the devil in the detail, and this is something we've gone through, is we need to educate whoever the commissioners are going to be. We need to educate them to say that's not what we intended. That is not what we intended. And there needs to be a certain level of trust that we're not trying to change orthodoxy. We're not trying to chain institutions. We're not trying to cause a problem. We're trying to say, let's provide a protected class, but let's respect the rights that you have under the First Amendment by delineating those rights, not only specifically here to say it's not an act of discrimination, but in a general exemption to say we respect whatever constitutional rights you have, state and federal law. So if the court comes out and says, they can do this, we've reaffirmed it. Employment, the court has said, you can do it, we have to follow that rule. So that's what we're trying to do. I am not the perfect wordsmith. I am not. I just try to write what everybody tells me I'd like to read. So if there's a better way of writing this to accomplish that purpose, I am open to anybody giving that suggestion. We can make amendment for the third reading. We can defer the second reading tonight to get that amendment. But are we going to continue to debate that religious organizations should not be subjected to this ordinance? If that's where we're going to go, then let's make that final decision once and for all and throw this whole thing away.
I think.
Come off my soapbox.
I think that the voters have spoken, and that needs to stay in place. If there's better language to accomplish what the Jewish community wants to do, and for future religious organizations, and I think we need to look at that language. I think we owe it to the community. I agree. I mean, the broad stroke didn't happen. If there is better language that illustrates what he was saying, I think we need to look at that language. But to relitigate the entire ordinance, is not what I think is happening here. But at the same time, let's look at that language, see if we can make some adjustments, and then get it done and get it in place.
If I may, I just, whatever we end up choosing to do, I have zero intention, and I hope everyone's on the same page that we're not pushing, like, I don't even necessarily feel that it's necessary to push off the second reading tonight at all. I think that that's very important, that we stick to the timeline that we have and we do not drag this out. I'm not interested in that.
I noticed Rabbi Mott's in the audience tonight. Is there some clarification you could add to REA's words for the concern of the language?
I didn't sign up to speak, but I defer to the mayor and what protocol is. I can answer questions from the council, or I can.
Do you have a statement that you'd like to make is specific to Mr. Prydenuff's to bring more clarification as Mr. Knipp was asking?
I'm happy to, whatever way you prefer. If you want me to answer specific questions, or just
You're here. You're welcome to approach the stand. I'll make an exception in terms of the registered speakers.
I'll do my best to address A.D. Munson. Everybody knows who I am. If you need for the record, so.
We'll limit it to 3 minutes, and then I'll offer extensions if it's needed.
Okay, I'll do my best. It's not prepared comments, more on just based on what I'm hearing from Terry. And I'm gonna reiterate what Councilman Prinoff said, that it has been a process that the mayor and the solicitor have really worked hard to get. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, if you're comfortable with it, you're welcome to remove your mask at the.
Triple vaccinated and got COVID after the third vaccine 2 weeks ago. I'm a walking antibody.
As you're moving around, we ask that you have it on, but while you're standing.
No problem. Got the most antibodies in the city. So
Closely followed by me.
that probably. Anyway, so sorry, just try to keep it to the comments brief, but again, reiterating that it is appreciated, and try to clarify what the solicitor keeps asking, so I don't understand if it's removing an exemption, why is that any better? So I'm just, first of all, to point out for the record that in, I don't know if it was ever in a written record, but it was sent an email to the entire council in January 27, 2020. I think it was the day before that passed. I think the day the ordinance actually passed, and we asked the exact same thing. We said that, just reading, we started the discussion a few months ago with the goal of completely exempting the facilities. Since that time, the exemption got narrower and narrower to the point where we therefore respectfully ask the council, again, either grant the general exemption and clarify it's not a place of public accommodation, or completely remove the exemption language. Exactly the same request then. As far as, I'm just going to go through the points, try to address them all. The point as far as a legal strategy, actually we were advised by legal counsel not to try to make any changes, because since some lawyers would say a bad bill, a bad ordinance can be sued. That's nice, but you don't live in Gulf, Manor. I, at the time, was representing all the religious organizations. We need to live here. We work well with council, work with the mayor. We're here to make an ordinance that accomplishes those goals. And therefore, this email was sent against the better advice of certain counsel, not my counsel, but outside counsel who were only interested in suing. So again, it's a matter of trust, but no, that opposite. We wanted a language we can live with, not a language we can sue. That's not our goal. I'm trying to remember now, as far as Councilman Gibbs' point, I'm trying to address each point. Is there, as far as to your point, yes, I think if there's no this language, we can go back and forth, as the solicitor is saying, to try to change the words of commercial. Solicitor did try, made several attempts. I spoke to some of the top attorneys. We spoke to some of the top attorneys in the country. Came to this. Other attorney had a problem. What about this language? Whatever we tried to do to tweak the language ended up failing to meet our goals. So we tried, and that's, over time, it takes time to get these lawyers, and it ended up, the consensus was, as counterintuitive as it sounds, they felt better with no religious exemption language for this section. Again, I think as far as the goals of both the voters was to have a ordinance that protected all protected classes, and in other areas in this law it does have religious protections. No one's going to be accusing the council of taking that away. But currently, since, like you said, only religious organizations in the village right now are the organizations that we represent, and the consensus was, as counterintuitive as it is, that if there is no other option, then leaving it silent would actually be better. Right now, the religious organizations don't let anyone use any of their facilities because of this ordinance. They are currently, we can argue that they're wrong, and their council is wrong, but right now, because of their fear of what they feel is they're open to litigation because of the original language, which the solicitor has made better already by the changes, the original language, no one's allowed to use those facilities outside of the synagogue itself. So they're hoping this makes it better for the villagers, having kosher facilities available for use in the community without fear of unintended litigation. I don't think, like we all said, this wasn't anyone's goal. This is how they understand the ramifications. I think I've done my 3 minutes, maybe more, so I will stop, answer any questions. I will sit down. If anyone wants to call me up again to specific questions, I'll do my best. My goal wasn't to speak, my goal was to listen.
Before the ordinance was passed, did the organizations allow people to use the facilities?
Absolutely. It's a community organization, any religious organization with limitations, as whatever policies each organization has their own, but absolutely. Including outside organization. Hawksworth has blood drives. Whether that will happen again in the future, I don't know, but yeah, depending on how it's constructed.
So let me ask you on the Hawksworth, how is that a commercial purpose?
According to your definition of commercial, that's a question. I'm not. The current commercial definition of commercial is that if it is, it might not be if it's not religious. If right now, if it's, in order to be a non-commercial, it has to be religious and not open to non-co-religionists. If I got that right, maybe too many negatives. I'm looking for the actual language.
Well, let's do this for the purpose of maybe some conclusion to it. We've been working on these changes and exchanging drafts throughout the entire year. And this is the second reading. And if you have different language on this exemption that you say, why don't you word it this way? Let us share that and look at it. But I'm not sure that council is wanting to go back and debate what all occurred before the ordinance was adopted. So the ordinance was adopted and then put to the ballot and it was passed. We then looked at it and said, well, you know what, maybe there's some things we can make more friendly, and that was the attempt to do it. If the concern is we do it and it's going to open the door, are you saying don't make any changes whatsoever to this ordinance? Leave it as it is.
It's clever. I think that all the changes you made, right, working together with Councilman Brinoff, were actually positive changes, which I hope we expressed, or the rabbis expressed to to Council Brunoff that was appreciated, this one language, which, again, my understanding is in an attempt to help, an attempt to make it better, which some of it did, the conclusion was we couldn't come up with satisfactory language to accomplish that goal of a small tweak of that definition, and therefore, the conclusion was to take it out. When no one's going to relitigate it, it's not about relitigating the whole.
I'm trying to, so there is no reason to wait for an additional draft from you because you can't come up with any language to accommodate what we're trying to do.
We're suggesting that removing that paragraph,
Is the only solution.
anything else is going to have, you can do this, make this better, and then there's another problem. It's like each solution comes with its own.
And that's what we're trying to invite, Rabbi, is if we're trying to give you the protection that we're hearing that you want, how the organization reacts to it, to say, well, we won't do blood drives anymore because of our fear. I'm not sure I would agree with that. I'm not sure if someone came here and complained, but I don't want us to speculate to death as to what about this, what about this, what about this, what about this, what about this. We're just trying to come back to say, we heard some things from people, we're trying to fix it. If you're saying we don't want to fix, because we told you in January 2020, we didn't want this language, then I guess I would ask, if there is some better language in B than what we've written to correct this, proffer it. If there's not, then let's know that it's not going to work.
I just wouldn't characterize it that way, but
Thank you. What I would say to council, and as a way of maybe closing it down at this point, if there's no other direct questions for Mr. Rabbi Monson or for the solicitor on this. I was taken by surprise about the Hawksworth thing, and I would personally like to know, because that clarifies some things for me, to say, listen, we were doing this before, but we're afraid of doing this specific thing moving forward. I'd like to hear what, not right now, but I would like to hear more of that, because then I can bring that to the administration and I can ask them that question. Well, what about this? Are they protected in this kind of situation? And, is there anything that we could add to it to make sure that it is protected? Or is it just something that, they shouldn't be doing anymore? So
I wasn't saying, I don't want to make any, I'm not speaking, I'm saying that they made a decision you can't have Hawksworth. Right now, the synagogue is not available for outside events. They could, I'm not saying they can't find a way to do that in a
Generally speaking, we're at the second reading right now. Moving forward, before we get to the final vote on this, if there's situations like that aren't occurring now, that you think, or that the community thinks wouldn't occur in the future, even with the current proposed changes, let me know what those situations are. I would find that very helpful.
Right now, the synagogue hall and the school hall is not available for use.
All right.
That's currently.
Well, as I'd like to speak with members of the community about that. Again, not necessarily right now, because we don't have the full
Absolutely.
Full availability of having those long conversations right now. And I'm sure other council persons would be interested as well, but definitely me, I'm speaking for myself. All right, any other questions?
If I may,
Question from you, question from there.
here's the good things I heard, is I didn't know, or at least I didn't remember, that you guys had this meeting back in May to try to do this, stuff like that. To hear that, or be reminded of it, I'm really pleased that you're paying attention to that stuff. Secondly, my heart, we heard me say earlier, I want to get this right. I've always paid attention to the process. There's a healthy process you have to go to, and sometimes it's painful, that's part of it. And I feel like just them saying, hey, you've done some more changes that are really good. We're just about there. I think we're just about to what I say is consensus. And these are our residents and community. And I think we're just so close. I think we shouldn't give up on this effort. And so there's actually a good feeling to this, even though it feels painful. And I don't feel any really restrictive stuff. I will say this though, there's a flag that goes up to me when people say, we're here to protect you. Because usually that's also a matter of loss of freedom. You protect horses by putting them in the thing, well, guess what? I mean, that's just an example. So, but, so.
I won't take any offense.
Yeah, please. That's first. But the point is, I don't know, I'm ignorant right now to what that means in this case, I have to think about that. If there is protection, it may not be, but I need to think about it. I can't make that decision right now. I need to digest this a little bit more, because I didn't know what this process was going on. It's kind of coming at, full speed right now. So that's just a question mark. When I hear it, I also have to say, okay, what may be being lost or changed here? I gotta figure out that balance, so.
And I want to thank both the community as represented by Mr. Pridenoff and our legal counsel. I heard the statements about how some progress has been made here, that it's very much appreciated, the tweaks that have been made, and I see that as a success in this very process of moving forward, and look forward to more communication with myself about the specific activities, as I said. And if there's no other specific questions.
I didn't mean to call you guys. Just clarify that.
All right.
No offense, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Munson. Appreciate your time.
So we have a motion on the table to approve it for second reading. That doesn't mean it's final. It has to go through a third reading, and I heard some discussion of maybe postponing a second reading. But the motion on the table is to call a vote for the second reading.
Is that a roll?
Yes,
Call
that
vote.
has to be a roll call vote.
Was there a second? I'm trying to remember. There was a second.
It was Ms. Cheney and Mr. Batcher.
Are we prepared?
So what happens,
We go to the third reading, so if there's other language amendments that can be brought forward to you, November 8th is the next meeting. If there's a preference to move that to November 22, we could do that. So if we get language that says, how about this? And you look at it, you could say, no, I want to think about it, move it to November 22. All this does is move it forward to the next step.
so we're still in the process of trying
Yeah.
to get that consensus or that.
Yeah, it takes three full readings. If we were to do this one, would be on the third one, but we don't have to, people could disagree on voting for the third reading. They could decide as a
Right, it
body
just
to move
advances
that
it to
third
the
reading. Yeah.
Correct.
And then the mayor breaks any ties.
Correct.
All right, roll call?
Mr. Batcher.
Yes.
Ms. Cheney.
Yes.
Mr. Knapp.
Yes.
Mr. Pridenoff.
Yes.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hart.
Yes.
Very good, thank you, everyone.
So if I get language ahead of time, I can share that with you in the legislative memo so you have a chance to look at it. And right now, that'd be for November 8th. I get the sense that if there's a request to move to November 22, there may not be an objection to it, but if we don't get any language, then you'll be asked to vote on it as it's written. So the last thing, I will request an executive session at the end of the meeting for two purposes. One, to deal with compensation of public employees, and the second, the purchase and sale of real estate.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Donnellan. For executive committee, didn't meet this evening. Is there any report?
No report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Snyder. Education, Ms. Cheney, is there any
Yes.
report?
Yes. I don't know if anybody's heard, but on Thursday, October 21st, a PRM staff member was hit by a vehicle in the crosswalk on Montgomery Road in front of the school, 9:30 a.m. Person was taken to the hospital by ambulance, but not seriously injured. Today, this morning, another staff member was almost hit by two cars this time. And that was at 7:30. I ran into Police Chief Isaac from Cincinnati on October 15th. And I questioned him at that time about the speeding taking place on Langdon Farm because there were some postings on PRM site about the speeders on Langdon Farm and what can we do about it. So I talked to the Police Chief Isaac at that time. He's very personable, very nice. And he said, oh my gosh, he said, Pleasant Ridge Community Council already contacted me about this. And he said, right now we're 150 officers short. We have 2 recruit classes going on. We're lucky if we get 60 out of that. So we're still going to be short. So that told me that I don't know if he's going to do anything or not. So I talked to our chair of the LSDMC about this, and she asked me to follow up with an email to Chief Isaac, which I did on October 19th, to see what his district, which is District 2, by the way, what they're planning to do. I have gotten no response yet. LSDMC has drafted a letter to send to the school board asking for help. I have talked to Chief Campbell about this, about Langdon Farm Road, and what we could do as Gulf Manor. Langdon Farm Road is out of our jurisdiction, which I kind of knew. District 2 has already told us District 2 has already told us at LSDMC that they didn't want Gulf Manor going to the school to even be there
Businesses too.
and help out.
I want the chemical company.
I like the golf course.
I want the sounds good. I'll take tax money for either one. Green.
Chief Campbell did say that if District 2 would invite us to help, that we could go ahead and do so. Otherwise, the only option that we have that might help would be, we have streets like Hamel, Mayflower, Graceland, we all go into Langdon Farm. So at these times in the morning, like 7:30 to 7:50 a.m., we could have our cruiser drive down these streets, turn Langdon Farm, and just make a presence and come back down. Also, the school gets out at 2:10, so it'd be 2:10 to 2:30 when we might need some help. Those are our concerns. So anyway, so there were some more postings today on PRM. I addressed it, told them what I was doing, and I asked for parents, if you could just help me. Send letters, send emails to Chief Isaac. Let's get this going. So they did ask me for his email address, and I did post that. So hopefully we'll have some help. November 10th is our next LSDMC meeting, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that again. And we're just gonna have to push forward. Now that we got the school done, getting the add-on taking place, now we gotta fight speeders and hopefully keep our kids safe and our staff at PRM. So if anybody else has any options that you can think of, let me know. I appreciate it, how to fight it, but we're gonna be taking this on, and that's it. Unless you wanna know about October 27th, it's the PRM October Bash. Oh, I thought you laughed. And it's 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's gonna take place this year because of COVID outdoors. They're gonna have music, they're gonna have a trunk or treat in the upper lot, and they'll have a pumpkin carving contest. For more information, they have a bounce house too, supposedly, and carnival games, and face painting. For more information, you can go to prmrocks.org/OctoberBash. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. I want to thank you for the thoroughness of your reports just over the course of, I want to say, as long as I have not been doing this report myself. Former Mayor Schwarzberg and I, while we were council members, were in charge of this committee, and our reports were nothing compared to hers. She does an excellent job.
Thank you.
Related to the traffic stuff, I was asked to attend a meeting of the group that is selecting the new superintendent for CPS. All right, so this was a meeting was attended by the mayor of Amberley, myself, the council members from Amberley, a number of groups from around Hamilton County, University of Cincinnati. Tower House had a representative there, all talking about, well, what is it that we would be looking for in the new superintendent? What are the things? What do we see as the strengths of CPS? What do we see as the weaknesses of CPS? What is it that we want in a superintendent, and what are some of the issues? And one of the issues that was brought up was the recent accident, recent person being hit just outside of Pleasant Ridge, Montessori, and the concern for pedestrian protocols around the school, and making that a priority. Currently, the board making that a priority of looking at what they can do in terms of those protocols to make things safer. But this committee, we weren't the only. I think they scheduled a number of these. This was the one that was assigned for our kind of region here, Amberley and Pleasant Ridge area. if you have feedback on strengths, weaknesses of CPS, or would like to hear from me what some of those, what was discussed in that meeting, happy to share that with you, what kinds of things people were saying. And if you'd like me to pass along anything, happy to do so as well.
Thank you for attending.
Just Jamie, a couple questions. If you had any hint on I know they're talking about adding on, but you mentioned, I think the first time that they decided to do that they were going to make changes to try to adjust or
They
deal
are.
with traffic.
I did see a little bit going on that for the expansion. They're taking out, I think it's the preschool playground. I think it might be on the side. And they're going to build up 3 floors, I think it's 3 floors. And add there, and they're gonna make the cafeteria bigger.
Okay,
But that's all I know so far.
I thought you mentioned they were gonna try to deal with traffic too as part of the.
They are, they're with the apartments complex that's gonna go in across the street, town properties, yes.
Okay,
They're working on that too,
okay.
yeah.
Secondly, I did hear, you might check on this to verify it, through the people at Pleasant Ridge, that they had planned to redo Langdon Farm in 2 years, but they moved the project ahead to next year.
Yeah,
I don't know the timing on it, but I heard it's next year, so.
okay.
And it's specifically to,
Mhm.
I heard they're gonna do the same thing.
2 lanes, I
2
heard.
lanes, center turn lane, bike lane.
Right.
So I heard that it's coming, it's not something today, but supposedly
Yeah.
that's gonna happen.
Right,
And then, side note, I heard there was a child that was missing from, did they?
oh, I don't know,
I haven't heard that. Usually I get
I shared
updates
that
through
on
the
the
chief on
Facebook
missing
page.
persons.
oh,
Yeah, did you? No? Okay. I'm sorry to bring that up, but
okay,
I shared it, because I saw it in Pleasant Ridge, and I shared it on our site too, so. Okay, thank you.
Again, is there a nonprofit report, Mr. Pradnoff?
No, sir.
Fire district board member report, Mr. Van Horn or Mr. Lanzer?
Yeah, so a few things. The next fire board meeting will be Wednesday, November 17th at 6 PM at Fairfax. I mentioned earlier, Chief Timmers announced that he will be, this week will be his last week of active duty with the fire department. From here until the end of the year, he will make appearances to do payroll, is what he said. And I believe they are well in process with the hiring process, the interview process for the next fire chief. And I believe they hope to have someone before the board at the next board meeting. The fire district hired a new full-time firefighter, Troy Myrick. Was part-time here out of Station 47, so we're glad to see him hired full-time. Another issue that's come to the administration's attention, we're concerned about the condition of Station 47, the interior condition. We understand that our firefighter friends here who are here this evening are understaffed, short-staffed, and they just don't have the capacity to do some of the maintenance that needs to happen there. I reached out to Chief Timmers earlier last week and voiced my concerns about that, and he is supposed to be coming up with a plan. So,
My understanding, this wasn't the only time that those concerns have been raised to the board.
and I speak to the firefighters about it. I spoke with Eric the last couple of days about it. I understand the position that especially he's in. He's one of our full-timers here, one of very few full-timers who are here. When you have time, you're working. But we need to develop a plan because the condition of that station is really kind of degraded here lately. And then at the last board meeting, we provided an update as to the direction Gulf Manor is going in terms of future relationship with the district. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr.
Only other
Lanzer.
thing was I mentioned the defibrillator grant work.
Yeah.
We have a conference call scheduled for this coming Thursday to keep the process going, so.
Is
So now, if I may ask on that, the deterioration situation at Station 47, that is technically our responsibility, is that correct?
We're responsible for the exterior. The district is responsible for the interior.
That's part of the lease agreement?
It's part of the agreement.
Okay.
There is one of the restrooms has an issue that's been there for a little while. I'd like to see some movement on that personally.
Literally.
They,
Military.
yeah, they can't hand, that needs to get fixed.
Mhm.
That needs to get resolved. The gym is also not in great shape. And that needs to get resolved sooner rather than later as well. Again, I reached out to, so what happened when the roof was replaced, all that debris has fallen down into the gym and it hasn't been cleaned up. And it's been quite a while since the roof was replaced. Again, I don't fault our firefighters.
It's just
They're only getting the hand that's dealt to them, but the district is responsible for maintaining the interior of that space.
Well, that, for context for individuals that might be watching the video of this evening or moving forward, Mr. Van Harn, would you speak a little more to the context of the need for the defibrillators and the process of that you've had to go through to get those?
Yeah, I was informed through Andy that the defibrillators, we have 2 of them in the district, is that right?
We have 2 of them at Station 47,
Okay.
right, Eric? Defibrillators?
And basically they're outdated. The recommendation has been made from the manufacturer that they're taken out of service. So they're not cheap. So we looked for grants to be able to help facilitate getting them. We did apply, or Andy did get a quote. We thought there was a grant available for about $50,000 that started the process. And right now they're available, we get 2 of them for about $38,000. So that's what we're applying for, to try to replace the 2 that we have that are outdated. So they're over 10 years old, and I think they're supposed to be replaced at 8 years or?
Yeah, they're supposed to be replaced at 8 years. Well, there was a letter circulated by Stryker, the manufacturer, that there is no longer components for our version defibrillator in the marketplace. So they're prone to what they consider catastrophic failure if they fail. Stryker's offering a 50% reduction in cost on a new one on a trade. So it just makes sense. Now's the time to get those defibrillators taken care of. Those are probably-
Critical piece of equipment. Right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, that's, a defibrillator is the thin line between some people making it, some people not.
I want to bring to people's attention the work of Andy and particularly Mr. Van Horn on this piece. I've tracked the board meetings on this, and I was surprised by how difficult it was for the group of people there to agree that this would be something that should be pursued. And that was championed by Mr. Van Harn and Mr. Lanzer. That's the only reason why it's happening. So thank you for your service to our guys and gals.
And the last thing I just wanted to say, since we have firefighters here from Station 47, thank you. You guys have been put in a tough situation over the last several months. And I know that I'm deeply appreciative of all the work you guys do.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Really,
That's hard work. He makes it possible. He makes our life easier.
All right, Mr. Betcher, Planning Commission.
No report. Planning Commission for Monday, November 1st has been canceled as there's no pending business. So next meeting will be Monday, December 6th, pending any business.
Very good. Mr. Knipp, any news on the community engagement front?
Not yet.
All right. As folks heard in Mr. Lanzer's report, community engagement is something that we're looking very closely at as part of our strategic planning process. Finance Committee, Mr. Betcher.
Yeah. Finance Committee did meet. I think Mr. Lanzer covered basically our entire agenda with the additional comments about the economic development revitalization funds. Still for November, there will be discussion around some police programs and the detailed pay policy. So, and then continuing understanding of the ARPA funding. Next finance committee meeting will be Monday, November 22nd at 6 o'clock.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Betcher. Any questions?
And I will say for those looking at the finance packet, the expenditures look a little large just because of the road construction project. For those who are just taking a glance at that, threw me off. So, end of report.
Right. Without any objection, I believe we'll be asking for an executive session at this time, or
Well,
did you
one
want to
note,
go over the?
And I should have picked it up during my report as well, just to give you an update. You should recall last meeting, we asked to add to the agenda tonight, legislation to approve a contract with Deer Park Silverton. We explained to the folks at Deer Park Silverton that we want to make sure that we have the entire, doesn't involve them, the entire package with Little Miami Fire and Rescue District. So asset allocation was an important component to us. We went over, Ron and I, last Monday, I think it was Monday, to the Deer Park Silverton board and asked them to please be patient with us. That we were told we would get a response from the district here in the next 2 weeks. Their concern, Deer Park board, is that they have 3 candidates that they want to hire and they don't want to lose them. But they did say they would give us that additional time. So I told them as soon as we can get something worked out, we'll be back, we'll get it approved. I said we may even call a special meeting just to approve the contract. But I explained to them, the contract is fine as proposed. We're very supportive of it and actually very much looking forward to a new relationship with Deer Park Silverton. So I would just ask you again with a motion, put that on the agenda now for November 8th with the hopes that we can bring it to you at that time.
So moved.
Second.
All those, so roll call or just all those?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Without objection, I take that as unanimous.
Before we head into executive session, do we need to discuss tentative dates to meet for the strategic planning stuff that Mr. Hurd sent dates out about? I forgot it's not on the agenda. I know he proposed 2 dates.
I think can I just call a meeting when we get that, when I get that input? from
Yeah,
folks?
you can give input to Mr. Hurth and the mayor. The mayor has the right to call a special meeting. Council has the right to call a special meeting. So it might be just send an email back to Mr. Hurth telling him what your availabilities may be over that couple-week window. He can coordinate with Mr. Dale, and then either the mayor can call it or council leadership can call that special meeting.
Perfect.
I just want to, Mr. Mayor, remind people that Halloween is going to be on Ardmore Street on Sunday, October 31st from 6 to 8. So come, if you don't live there, bring your chair, bring your candy. There should be cider and donuts, and also a photo booth to take family pictures with a Halloween backdrop. So.
I saw also listed on the, I believe I saw this on the Go Golf Manor Facebook page, information about if you're looking for a map of where all the homes are in Golf Manor that are going to be participating outside of Ardmore, that you can find that information on that page as well. All right, for those who are unaware, either watching or here presently, when we go into executive session, it's our secret meeting.
It's not a secret meeting.
Not a secret meeting, sorry. Get myself in trouble.
Thanks, guys.
Yes. Well, let's make the motion, and I will,
I'm sorry,
yeah, and then we can take
So
that bio.
to move into, I make a motion to move into executive session for the
Compensation of
Compensation
public
of public
official
official
and
and
discussion of purchase or sale
discussion
of
of
real estate.
purchase of real estate.
Which is not secret.
This has to be a roll call.
Yes, it has to be a roll call.
Mr. Betcher?
Yes.
Ms. Cheney?
Yes.
Mr. Knipp?
Yes.
Mr. Pridnoff?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Van Horn?
Yes.
Okay, we will see you after a little bit.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, really? Oh, I thought you meant our meeting would be 2 minutes.